Breaking news has just surfaced about Expedition Bigfoot, and it's far more disturbing than anyone imagined. After years of silence, new information reveals why the hit Paranormal series suddenly vanished mid-season. Leaked reports, suppressed footage, and insider testimony all point to one terrifying conclusion. The crew didn't walk away. They were forced to. What they uncovered deep in the wilderness was so shocking, so unprecedented, that production was shut down within days. Stay until the end, because what's coming out now could change everything we thought we knew about the legend of Bigfoot. It all started with silence. No warning, no finale. Just an empty time slot where Expedition Bigfoot was supposed to air. One week, the team was teasing new discoveries from the Pacific Northwest. The next, everything was gone. Episodes pulled, social media wiped, even promotional clips deleted overnight. Fans flooded the network with messages, desperate for an answer, but no one replied. Not the producers, not the cast, not even the streaming platforms. And now, years later, insiders have begun to break that silence, revealing that the show didn't end naturally. It was forcibly shut down. According to leaked production memos, the crew was pulled from the field under emergency extraction protocols during the final days of filming. Helicopters were dispatched, leaving thousands of dollars in gear behind in the mountains. The report described the crew as disoriented, distressed, and unwilling to continue. What could have pushed a veteran team of survival experts, scientists, and ex-military trackers to flee without warning? The most disturbing detail comes from a series of encrypted radio transmissions sent the night before the shutdown. Audio logs later surfaced from a deleted server, panicked voices, static, and one phrase repeated twice before the feed cut. "It's moving around us." The signal abruptly ended. Within 24 hours, filming ceased entirely. Crew members were told to sign non-disclosure agreements under threat of legal action. Even the network executives who greenlit the project have since distanced themselves, declining interviews. The official explanation blamed weather and unexpected logistical issues. But internal notes tell another story, one that refers to evidence of biological anomaly, unclassified vocal phenomena, and potential risk to personnel. These weren't the words of a canceled show. These were the words of a cover-up. Something happened in those woods that made the network stop everything. Something they weren't ready for. And whatever it was, it scared even the people who make their living chasing the impossible. Before the silence, Expedition Bigfoot was more than just a reality show. It was a scientific mission disguised as entertainment. Launched with cutting-edge technology and a team of seasoned investigators, it promised to use data and modern tools to finally prove or disprove the existence of the legendary creature. Leading the charge was Bryce Johnson, a skeptic turned believer, joined by Dr. Maria Mayer, primatologist Russell Acord, and tracker Ronnie LeBlanc. Together, they ventured into uncharted terrain, armed with drones, AI-driven heat sensors, parabolic microphones, and DNA analysis equipment. What set the show apart was its credibility. They weren't relying on blurry photos or tall tales. They were mapping migration routes, analyzing environmental DNA, and cross-referencing sightings with satellite imagery. For the first time, the hunt for Bigfoot looked less like folklore and more like field science. Ratings soared. Viewers weren't just entertained, they were convinced. Each season grew darker, more mysterious, with the team venturing deeper into areas few humans had ever explored. But behind the scenes, something was changing. Crew logs from the final season revealed technical failures that made no sense. Batteries dying instantly, GPS units spinning in circles, radio frequencies jamming for hours. At first, they blamed weather interference. Then, the animals started disappearing. Trail cameras captured movement that didn't match any known species. Massive prints appeared overnight, too deep, too far apart, too perfect. Production notes from the show's final expedition hinted at tension in the camp. The crew was sleeping in shifts, weapons were being kept within reach, and morale was deteriorating. Something in the woods was following them, not aggressively at first, first, but closely, intelligently. One journal entry from a camera operator simply read, "It knows we're here." That was the turning point. Expedition Bigfoot had gone from a scientific pursuit to something far more dangerous, a situation spiraling out of control. And in a matter of days, what began as a search for evidence would become a desperate effort to make it out alive. The first real indication that something was wrong came after a long stretch of quiet days in the field. The team had set up base in a remote valley surrounded by dense pine forest and fog-choked ridgelines. For nearly a week, nothing had happened. No sounds, no movement, not even animal tracks. Then, out of nowhere, the sensors came alive. Motion detectors, thermal scanners, and seismic readers all began registering movement from multiple directions at once. The readings were massive, fast, and precise. Dr. Maria Mayer later described it as controlled chaos. Whatever was moving out there wasn't stumbling through the brush. It was circling them. Russell and Maria were the first to follow the signal. They trekked half a mile down a riverbank and froze at what they saw. A massive handprint pressed deep into the mud. The palm alone measured nearly 14 inches across, and the finger indentations were so distinct they could see skin texture. It wasn't a bear. It wasn't human. It was something else entirely. You could feel the power in that print, Russell later said. Whatever made it was watching us. Back at camp, the energy shifted. The team, normally excited by new evidence, was quiet, uneasy. The forest grew unnaturally still. Even the insects went silent. As night fell, Bryce reviewed the thermal drones and saw movement, a tall, upright heat signature darting between trees before vanishing behind a ridge. It didn't behave like an animal avoiding danger. It moved as if it understood it was being watched. Then came the sounds, low, guttural calls echoing from every direction. The microphones captured faint responses miles apart, like a language being spoken between unseen figures. Ronnie tried to dismiss it as echo or wildlife, but the tone and rhythm didn't match anything known. At one point, Maria whispered, "It's not calling out, it's communicating." The unease turned to dread when a camera crew found trees freshly marked with deep claw gashes nearly 10 feet high. The bark was torn, the sap still wet. That was the first night the team armed themselves, not out of paranoia, but instinct. Bryce's journal entry from that evening read, "It's here, it's watching, and I think it wants us to know." The next morning, their camp perimeter sensors tripped again, but this time there were no thermal signatures, no movement on camera, only the faint outline of another handprint on the metal supply case near the tents, a perfect match to the one by the river. Something wasn't running from them anymore. It had stepped out of legend and was now toying with them. By the fourth week of the expedition, curiosity had turned into quiet fear. The forest, once alive with the hum of night insects and echoing bird calls, had gone dead silent. The crew was exhausted, running on adrenaline and dread. Then, early one morning, Maria and Russ followed a foul smell drifting through the trees, a thick metallic odor of blood and decay. When they reached the clearing, what they found froze them in place. It wasn't an animal kill like they'd seen before. It was a massacre. The ground was torn apart, splintered branches, drag marks, and bones. Dozens of bones. But they weren't scattered the way scavengers leave them. They were clean, deliberate, arranged almost symmetrically. Ribs snapped at precise angles, joints separated with unnerving accuracy. Maria knelt beside what looked like the remains of a deer, but its spine had been severed cleanly, as if by surgical force. Around it were massive impressions in the soil, knuckle-shaped, spaced evenly apart, as though something large had moved on all fours. Russ's voice trembled as he radioed back to Bryce. "We've got a kill site, but it's wrong. It's all wrong." When the rest of the crew arrived, the mood shifted from analysis to alarm. The area didn't just look like a feeding ground, it looked like an experiment. Several bones had small circular holes bored into them, the marrow removed. Maria muttered, "This wasn't feeding. This was harvesting." The team documented what they could, but even the hardened survivalists were shaken. Bryce later described the scene as calculated brutality. Every piece of evidence suggested intelligence, not the chaotic violence of a predator, but the methodical precision of something that understood anatomy. They took samples and marked the coordinates, but as they prepared to leave, Russ noticed something that chilled him to his core, a series of massive footprints leading away from the site. The stride was enormous, nearly 6 feet between each step. At the end of the trail, pressed deep into the mud, was another handprint. That night, the crew sat around the campfire, silent. No one spoke. No one reviewed footage. The sound operator refused to wear his headset, saying he kept hearing breathing behind him during playback. By midnight, every piece of equipment began malfunctioning. Batteries drained, lenses fogged, and drones crashed without warning. The forest was reclaiming its silence, and the team knew they had crossed a line. They were no longer documenting a mystery. They were trespassing on something's territory, and whatever it was, it wanted them to know it. The discovery of the kill site changed everything. What began as a scientific search for evidence had now evolved into something far more dangerous and far more intelligent. The team, still reeling from what they'd found, pressed deeper into the valley, following a pattern of heat signatures that seemed to move with purpose. Bryce ordered drones to sweep the ridge, while Maria and Ronnie hiked ahead. What they found that day would alter the tone of the entire investigation. Near the edge of a frozen creek, Maria spotted a formation that, at first glance, looked natural, branches stacked and frozen over. But as they approached, it became clear this wasn't random debris. The logs had been arranged in a deliberate triangular structure, reinforced with moss and stone. Inside were bones, cleaned, organized by size, and several smooth river rocks carved with straight, parallel grooves. It wasn't a den, it was something more. "This was built," Maria whispered. "Someone made this." Russ examined the area and noted something chilling. Claw marks etched into nearby trees, not from aggression, but communication. They appeared to be symbols or tally-like carvings, all positioned about 10 feet high. Nearby, a second formation sat partially hidden under a snowdrift. Inside were fragments of animal hides, folded and tied with vines. "This isn't instinct," Bryce said later in his field log. "It's behavior." When they reviewed drone footage that night, they saw movement. A tall figure emerged briefly from the tree line, bending, examining one of the broken structures, almost as if it was aware they had touched it. Then, as if in retaliation, the figure straightened and stared directly at the hovering drone before vanishing back into the shadows. The heat signature showed it moving fast, but controlled, almost deliberate. The next day, the team returned to the site and found the formation destroyed. Branches snapped, rocks scattered, and deep footprints circling their previous steps. Maria described feeling watched from every direction. The forest had gone completely still again, but the silence didn't feel natural anymore. It felt intelligent, responsive. When they reported their findings to the production base, the network told them to keep filming but avoid speculation. Bryce ignored that order. He and the crew privately concluded that what they were tracking wasn't a primitive species. It was a parallel one, something that adapted, observed, and understood human presence. A being capable of thought, strategy, and retaliation. From that moment on, the expedition shifted from pursuit to survival. As Bryce put it later, "We weren't studying it anymore. It was studying us." Back at the base camp, Bryce spent hours reviewing audio data captured by parabolic microphones scattered across the forest. For days, he heard nothing but wind, distant birds, and the occasional creak of trees. Then, one night, something surfaced, faint at first, buried beneath the static. A low, resonant tone that didn't match any known animal call. It rose and fell rhythmically, almost like speech. Bryce leaned closer, adjusting the filters. The sound repeated, this time accompanied by another, lower voice, overlapping, almost conversational. He froze. "That's not random," he whispered into his recorder. "That's language." The team assembled around the monitor as Bryce replayed the file. The voices were deep, guttural, yet unnervingly articulate. They weren't growling or mimicking. They were communicating. The syllables came in patterns, 3 distinct phrases, followed by a pause, then repeated again with tonal variation. The forest itself seemed to breathe with the sound. Dr. Maria Mayer sent the sample to linguist Dr. Ronald Casper, who had previously studied suspected Bigfoot vocalization. His reply arrived within hours. "These are structured vocal patterns. They demonstrate repetition, response, and tonal shifts. clear signs of linguistic intelligence. As they continued analyzing the recordings, something even more disturbing emerged. There weren't just two voices. There were multiple, some closer, some distant, weaving in and out of one another like a coordinated chant. One phrase, however, appeared consistently, a word-like sound the team later transcribed as "Kumba." The deeper voice would say it first, the others would respond, and then silence. The atmosphere in the tent turned cold. Bryce noted that the ambient noise dropped nearly to zero during the playback. Even the surrounding microphones went dead for 8 full seconds. Maria theorized that Kumba might be a name, or perhaps a signal. Russ, however, had another theory, that it wasn't meant for them, but about them. "What if they're not warning each other?" he asked quietly. "What if they're calling us?" The crew immediately placed motion sensors around the camp perimeter. That night, just before 3 a.m., the recorders picked up a single knock on wood, followed by a faint echo of that same voice, low and deliberate. "Kumba." The crew rushed outside, lights scanning the darkness, but there was nothing. No footprints, no movement, only that echoing word fading through the trees. The next morning, Bryce radioed the network, requesting backup and authorization to retreat. The response he received was chillingly bureaucratic. Continue documentation until further notice. They were being told to stay, even as the forest began speaking back. Within days of the mysterious recordings, the Expedition Bigfoot camp changed from a scientific operation to something that looked more like a military outpost. Security tightened. Communication with the outside world was heavily restricted. Producers stopped giving daily updates to the network. Then, without warning, everything collapsed into chaos. An anonymous member of the post-production team leaked a short clip of the forest audio to a small online forum, less than 30 seconds long. In it, 2 distinct voices could be heard exchanging what sounded unmistakably like words. The clip ended abruptly, with a sound that resembled a deep exhale, followed by static. Within hours, the file spread like wildfire. People analyzed, slowed, and filtered it. Linguists, conspiracy theorists, and cryptozoologists all agreed on one thing: the cadence and tone were unlike any known animal. The word Kumba could clearly be heard. Then, just as quickly as it appeared, the file vanished. Every copy was deleted. Forum pages were shut down, and those who had shared it received legal takedown notices. The user who first uploaded the clip deleted their account, leaving behind only one cryptic post: "We were told to stop. They said it wasn't human." That was when the network went dark. Expedition Bigfoot was pulled from every platform within 48 hours. Promotional content disappeared, websites redirected to error pages, and even the show's trailer on YouTube was removed. Crew contracts were terminated under strict non-disclosure agreements. Sources close to production said they were threatened with legal action if they ever discussed what happened in the woods. Inside the team, fear spread fast. Ronnie reportedly began having vivid nightmares, claiming he could still hear the voices whispering in the static. Maria stopped taking calls. Bryce, once the optimistic believer, went silent entirely. His final email to staff simply read, "Some things aren't meant to be recorded." Behind the scenes, there were whispers of government involvement. Unmarked vehicles were seen near the production site, and the storage facility housing the raw footage was reportedly confiscated for review. But no official agency ever confirmed their role. Whether it was corporate liability, national security, or sheer terror, the message was clear. Whatever the team had captured was never meant for public ears. By the time the dust settled, Expedition Bigfoot no longer existed. To the outside world, it was just another canceled show. But to those who were there, it was something else entirely. An operation that stumbled across the unexplainable and was shut down before the truth could escape. When the dust finally settled, Expedition Bigfoot had vanished from existence as if it had never been there. Not a single press release, no farewell post, no official statement from Discovery or Travel Channel, just silence. The show's streaming pages redirected to blank placeholders, and fans who searched for old episodes were met with error messages. To the public, it looked like an abrupt corporate deliberate decision, but to those close to the production, it looked like something far more deliberate. Crew members later admitted that they'd been ordered to surrender all footage, field notes, and personal devices used on location. Those who resisted were reminded of their contracts and threatened with lawsuits. One anonymous technician described how security personnel arrived without warning at the editing studio, collected every hard drive, and sealed them in unmarked cases. When asked what was going on, a supervisor reportedly said, "The footage is being transferred to another department." No one knew which department, or if it even belonged to the network. Bryce Johnson, the show's host, broke his silence months later during a low-profile podcast appearance. His tone was somber, his words careful. "Some discoveries change you," he said, "and some discoveries change everything." When pressed to elaborate, he refused, adding only, "We found something that looked back at us." That single line reignited the mystery. Fans flooded social media demanding the truth, but Bryce vanished again. No further interviews, no social posts, nothing. Meanwhile, Maria Mayer and Russ Accord quietly moved on to other projects, refusing to discuss the expedition. Ronnie LeBlanc reportedly left the field entirely, citing psychological fatigue. Insiders claim several team members experienced insomnia, paranoia, and recurring nightmares involving deep voices calling their names from the woods. Then came the final twist. The area where the expedition took place was suddenly declared off-limits for environmental conservation. Local hikers reported new fences, motion-activated cameras, and warning signs where none had existed before. Some said they saw military-style trucks entering the region at night. Others heard strange sounds in the distance, deep, rhythmic calls echoing through the trees. Whether it was corporate damage control or a government cover-up, one thing was certain. Expedition Bigfoot hadn't just been canceled, it had been erased, and those who knew the truth weren't allowed to speak, because whatever they'd found out there was still out there.